We've been doing a series called Paradigms about the worldviews, or the ways that we see the world, that we live under, the messages that we have. And it's this simple idea of, the Greek word is pattern, which means pattern of thought. And we've been looking at how do we live under the pattern of thought that Jesus taught, the way that he brought about. You've heard this story, many of you before, but it's relevant. About 4 years ago, probably maybe even more now, we were away on holiday, when you could do that, when it wasn't COVID, in France. And it was a wonderful break. We got away. And in the middle of the holiday, I was ill, which isn't an uncommon experience. But when I'm ill, and I don't want to make this a gender thing, but guys aren't as good. I'm certainly not as good. Maybe I'll just make it a personal thing. I'm not as good at being ill. I feel sorry for myself, moan and all the rest of it. But anyway, I was in a bit of a moan, and I was lying on the caravan bed thinking, why am I ill on holiday? And I started a debate with God about healing. This is not an uncommon conversation that we have together sometimes, less so now, but I was going along the lines of this. Why does it seem so easy for people to be healed in the Bible? And at different times in history, I've read stories of that, where God moves or people are prayed for and they're healed in an instant. And yet it's so difficult for me. No, moan. Like, it was a bit of a feeling sorry for me moment. Yeah, pity party, that's exactly what it is. A pity party, and the only one that's there is you. No one else shows up to that party, yeah. But why can't I pray and see healing come now in this moment? That went on for a while. And it was born of frustration, but also a desire to experience the things of God. And God is so gracious with us in those moments. And I find that often, even though it's my frustration that's boiling up, he begins to speak and give information and insight. And so I was kind of lying on my bed. I felt God gave me a picture or a vision. And it was a really clear picture. And it was not too dissimilar to what I've showed you here. And it was a picture of a red brick wall with a doorway. And at first I didn't see the doorway. But in the image, lots of people were trying to get over the wall to the other side. And the other side was this beautiful meadow full of lush grass and all things good. And I knew in that moment that was the kingdom of God, the things of God that bring life. And everybody was trying to get over the wall, and they had all sorts of things. They had ladders, they had, picks that you hammer into the wall, and were trying to jump and climb up, all sorts of fancy ways to get over, but nobody could get over the wall. And after a while, they got exhausted and just lay at the bottom of the wall, disappointed, frustrated, and tired. And then I was thinking to myself, why? I saw this door wide open through the wall into the field. And in my head, I was like, why aren't people just going through the door? Like, that makes perfect sense. Why are you trying to get over this way? And I just left that. It was interesting. What are you trying to say? Next morning, I was a bit happier, feeling a bit better. I dropped off the kids at the kids program, went and got a wee espresso, which I did, my routine. And I opened the Bible, and I have a reading plan that I do. And it was, the next in that was John 10. And I read these words, and it says this. And we're going to read it in full in a moment. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his sheep by name and leads them out. And I knew in that moment, okay, I need to listen. God, you're trying to tell me something. And a little bit later in that chapter, which we'll read in full in a moment, it says, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. We're going to look at this text this morning and look at it in the context of paradigms and all that we've been talking about, this idea of Jesus setting us free. And let me give you a little bit of context, because we're going to read this chapter in a moment, but it's John's gospel that we're reading from, the gospel according to John. There's 4 gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you get these 3 gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and many of you know this, I know, which are called the synoptic gospels because often they have a lot of things in common. John's gospel is a little bit different. It's written in a different style. It's got a different kind of approach. And in John's gospel, he speaks mostly about life. And he talks about the life that's found in Jesus, and it's an eternal kind of life. He actually uses this word, life unto the age. Eternal life, it's translated as. And it's really the same as the life of the kingdom. It's John's language for the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven that's written about in Matthew and Mark and Luke. And it's really about this new creation life that God offers to those who come with faith to the Anointed One, the Messiah, the Christ. So that's the kind of context of his gospel. And John does all these clever things that theologians like to think about, but he organizes his gospel in such a way to really demonstrate to you and I who read it that Jesus is this Christ, this Anointed One, this Messiah who God would send that would bring new creation life. So everything he does is to try and prove to you that is what is the case. And he writes at the very end of his book to kind of make it really clear, just in case you haven't picked up that's what he's trying to do, just in case it's too subtle. And he says this, but these things I've written, or these things are written, so that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that he's the Son of God. And then the final part, and that believing in him, by putting faith in him, you might have life through his name. So that's his goal in writing. I want you to know that this person that we encountered in the flesh, Jesus, we beheld his glory, he came in grace and truth. He is the Messiah, the Son of God, and all that I am writing is to try and prove that to you, and that you might respond with faith. So that's what he's been talking about. And this particular text that we're reading in a moment, John chapter 10, remember, there's not chapters in the original writing. That's just for us to help find it. But so just before that text, what's been happening in the discussion, what he's been writing about is a series of debates that Jesus has been having with the religious leaders of the time. So right from chapter 6 through to 8, you can read about this. You get these heated debates with Jesus and the religious leaders about his authority. How does he have a right to say who he is, and where does his authority come from, and who does he think he is, basically? And so you get these really strange, interesting debates that John sets up for us. And then in John chapter 9, there's this story. It's a sign, and John writes 7 signs. That's another story for another day in his book, and this is number 6. And what he's talking about in this story is a really interesting encounter with a blind man from birth. But it's got a deeper meaning to it. The whole story plays out in John chapter 9, that Jesus heals this man born blind. And at first the religious leaders don't believe it. And then when they can't disprove it, they're really upset about it. And it kicks off this whole reaction to Jesus. And John finishes the text with this statement that, Jesus' words, for judgment or to bring a decisive verdict, I came into the world. That those who do not see may see, and those who see may be known to be blind. So it's this really interesting story which is about a literal blind man being healed to see, and he eventually encounters Jesus and believes that he's Messiah. Then you get these people who can see clearly, but actually in some way Jesus is saying they are blind to what is real. They're blind to the truth. So it's all about how we see. So that's everything that's been going on in the story before we even get to the text in John chapter 10. But I just think it helps put it all in a bit of a context or perspective for us. So shall we read it together? Does that sound like a plan? So if you have a Bible, you can open it to John chapter 10, or you can listen along, or if you have the translation, I think it's in there. I'm not sure that I have it on it was quite a long passage. No, I don't. So we'll read it out and just listen to it. Let God speak to you through it. It's quite a long passage. And then we're just going to spend a short moment opening the text together. It says this, truly, truly, I say to you, John chapter 10, verse 1. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls to his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he's brought them out, all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. This was a figure of speech that Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. Understandably, because it's quite confusing. So Jesus uses another image to try and help them. So Jesus said to them, verse 7, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find good pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not know the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down. I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. So loads in there, deep, confusing. You're wondering what Jesus is getting at. And then John writes this. He says, there was again division among the Jews because of these words. Many of them said, he has a demon and he is insane. Why would we listen to him? Others said, these are not the words of one who is oppressed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of a blind? So they're still debating this whole scenario of like, who is this guy? Like, and some are saying like, he is out of his mind, crazy. Or like he's evil. He is obsessed or oppressed by some evil force. And then others are like, yeah, but he just healed a guy who was blind. So really, is that possible? And again, it's in this context of John trying to say that this is the Christ, the Messiah. So I want to look at, for a short moment, the characters in the story. It's a lot to take in. I'm not going to go into super depth, but I just want to pick up what is it that Jesus is trying to say here? And what is John trying to get us to grasp? And what on earth has it got to do with living in the way of Jesus and the eternal kind of life that he's given? And what on earth has it got to do with what we've been talking about over the last number of weeks? Hopefully, we'll be able to do all of that together. So let me look just really quickly at the characters in the story. So there's two stories, really, which have slightly different meanings, and there's lots of layers to them, but each of the story has some key characters, okay? You got the shepherd, okay, which is the main person in the character, or the good shepherd, as he's described. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. So you got the shepherd, who's the character who lays down his life for the sheep. So that's the first character in this image that Jesus is using. And then you've got this other character, these other characters called thieves and robbers. So they're in both the images that Jesus has used. Thieves and robbers are ones who come to steal, kill, and destroy. They come to fleece. Okay? Then you've got the gate, or the gatekeeper. So in the first one, you've got the gatekeeper who opens to the shepherd. And in the second one, this is a wee bit more explicit, you've got the gate, or the door, through which you enter. It's the way to life, the way to flourishing, the way to new creation life. That's the gate, or the gatekeeper. And then you've got this other sort of side character in the story in the second one, which seems to confuse things a little bit, but it's the hired hands. So you've got this little sort of add-on to the second part, which is the hired hands who look after the sheep, but without the authority of the shepherd. Okay? So you've got the shepherd, the thieves and robbers, the gate or the gatekeeper, and the hired hands. You with me so far? Yeah? So what is Jesus trying to say through all this that we need to pay attention to? Well, it's actually quite simple. First one is this: the way of life is found by being led by the shepherd, by responding to his voice. That's the first thing. This life, new creation life, this way of life, this meadow beyond the wall is found through listening to the shepherd's voice and through being led by the shepherd. Simple enough. More explicitly, Jesus actually goes on, because the disciples don't pick that up straight away. He says, actually, not just is it being led by the shepherd, it's also that the way to life, like the way through which I enter this kind of life, the gate or the door is actually Jesus himself. So not only is Jesus the good shepherd who leads us into life and we follow his voice to find life, he is also the way through which we receive and enter that life. He is the door, the gate through which we go. And what about the thieves and robbers? Well, there's loads of ways to understand this, but in a really simple way, it's basically Jesus saying all other ways will ultimately steal, kill, and destroy. All other ideas, all other people that come as potential messiahs, literally, all other religious settings or concepts, even from your religious leaders right now, all those other things are actually thieves and robbers that will kill, steal, and destroy you. You could understand that as people. You could understand that as influencers. You can understand that as political figures or ideas. You could understand that as philosophies or religious ideas or personalities. It doesn't really matter how you understand that. It's basically saying anything that's not born of me, that doesn't come through me, will ultimately fleece you. It will steal, kill, and destroy like a thief or a robber would. You with me so far? Okay, well then this is the little added extra, which is really interesting, which is the hired hands. Temporary shepherds. So what are the hired hands? Well, in this particular context, they are the religious leaders. But you can put it into your own context. They are people who are not under the authority of the shepherd, but who are trying to lead you into life or their version of life. But actually, ultimately, they're in it for themselves and not for you. And everyone that's out to lead you and promise you all sorts of things, if you do this, if you come and join this, if you're part of this, then you will find life. Actually, they're just hired hands. So when the going gets tough and actually there's no benefit in it for them anymore, they leave. And Jesus is talking specifically about the religious leaders, but you could put other people in there too. They will not lead you into life because they only really care about themselves. And we've all experienced leaders, people like that, right? Jesus is saying, look, the only one who ultimately can lead you into life is me. Listen to my voice. And then he describes why he has authority to say that. Because I'm the good shepherd. You can listen to my voice because I lay my life down for you. So I'm not in it to get what I can from you. I am coming to lay my life down for you. And I'm the only one that has authority to do that. And I have authority to lay it down. And I have authority to pick it up. Therefore, listen to me. I am different. It's quite a bold claim, isn't it? Like I know maybe we're in a church setting, we believe in Jesus, some of us, so like, that makes sense. We've heard it so many times, of course, but like, just think about that that is a pretty bold claim. That I am the way to life, that every other way is going to lead to exhaustion and to stealing, killing, and destroying. Listen to me. Even those that communicate and seem to be really great at leading you into life, actually many of them are just in it for themselves. They aren't willing to lay their lives down. Don't listen to them. They're just hired hands. It's a pretty bold claim. And understandably, for the audience, it creates a bit of a reaction. Like, immediately they're like, no, hold on a minute. Like, this guy is out of his mind. Like, who says that? Like, who actually makes that kind of claim that I have come to give life and that you ought to listen to my voice, because if you listen to my voice, you will be led into life, and just creates this reaction. And some believe and some completely react. So it got me thinking of a question, which is really simple, but it's this: what voice has the most influence in our lives? And I know this maybe seems really straightforward, but are we listening and being led by the Good Shepherd? Or are there other voices that are really leading and shaping us? Even potentially seemingly good ideas that are ultimately just hired hands, people in it for themselves. Have we outsourced our life with Christ to hired hands, and they cannot lead us into life. Only Christ can. Have you ever heard of the phrase, I've used it a couple times already, being fleeced? Do anybody use that? Oh, they really, what do we mean when we say that? Yes, someone ripping us off, someone like stealing from us, someone, and of course, like, there's a relevance to the sheep, you know, literally being fleeced comes, I think, from the 1500s, where people would have gone into their neighbour's sheepfold and taken the fleece off the sheep's back to steal from them. So then we colloquially will say, you fleeced us. If someone has stolen from us, you've cheated me, you swindled me, you stripped me of money. Like, that's essentially what Jesus is saying here. Like, every other thing is going to fleece you. It's going to leave you without, swindle you, cheat you, promise you much, take from you, and give nothing back. And then he makes this bold claim into that. I am different. I'm actually different. I'm actually coming as the good shepherd, and I'm actually making this claim, which is pretty extreme, that I'm the only one that can lead you into life. Listen to my voice above all else. Every other idea and promise and leader is a pretender and will fleece you dry. Like, that's quite an extreme claim, exclusive claim maybe. And that understandably creates this reaction. There was a division among the Jews because of these words. Many of them said he is a demon and is an Obscene. Why listen to him? Others said these are not the words of a demon. And then later on it says, and many believed in him there. So when Jesus makes these claims to us, he's always making an invitation. I think sometimes we kind of assume that Jesus is kind of nice and just like says kind of nice philosophical things that we can kind of integrate, like life hacks and stuff that we can take and use and put into our thing. But actually, most of what Jesus says, in the Gospels at least, is quite divisive in a way that it creates a response. It calls for a response. It calls for a, I don't like that, or I need that. So often, I think when we're thinking about life in the kingdom, it comes down to whether or not we believe him, whether or not we activate faith in his voice and in what he says, whether or not we place authority on his message and his voice in our lives. It comes down to what we've talked about a lot, this simple word faith. Do I really, really trust Jesus? Do I trust him fully? Do I trust what he says? Do I believe what he promised? Do I live under it? And for some of us, that's like a deep life question of I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure whether Jesus is the Messiah. I'm not sure whether he's the way to life. And you have to wrestle with that and walk that out and ask some important questions. And he's up for that. And for us that have maybe responded with faith, I think it's a different kind of question. Because like my conversation about healing and the image that God gave, or I believe God gave, most of it, it's not that black and white for us. Like, we know Jesus to be true, we believe his voice, but actually on a day-to-day, most of the time we're trying to get over the wall some other way. Like, most of the time we're trying to find a way to life that isn't actually born of absolute trust in Christ and his way. And often they're confusing because they're religious things, or they're things that seem good and have values that are good and are maybe even like parts of the words of Jesus or parts of the kingdom of God, but actually it's not coming from faith or trust in him. It's actually our attempt to get there. And then we wonder, like we talked about the last few weeks, that we just get exhausted and lay there disappointed and frustrated that we can't access the life that he promised. Jesus, when he's speaking, doesn't invite us to integrate his ideas into our ideas. He invites us to take our seat, to come off our seat of judgment and invite him to take that seat. What I mean by that? Like, our whole way of thinking in the world is that we sit on the seat of judgment for our life. Like, we are the filter through which everything is decided about true and not true. We are the ones who determine our perception of the world around us. We are king. We are judge. And the invitation is not to put Jesus out there and listen to his words and say, okay, let me think about that, Jesus. Okay, right, I don't like that, but I like this. Or I'm not sure about that, but I like this. And we're always still sitting in the seat of throne of judgment, that I'm in charge, that I'm king or queen, that I'm the one in judgment. Actually, the invitation of Jesus is quite subversive. It's to come down off that seat and to invite him to take the seat on our behalf and to kneel before him, which is a pretty strong thing. It's actually saying, okay, I don't really, truly know what is true. Most of the time, I'm trying to grapple with it, but I am trusting that you know what is true and that your voice is paramount. And so I'm coming and I'm kneeling and I'm giving him the right to judgment, him the right to determine what is right and true, him the right to determine my worldview. That's a pretty uncomfortable thing for me, and I'm a religious leader, or whatever you want to call me, because actually it's an invitation to humble ourselves and invite God to have preeminence. And yet it's a beautiful invitation. I've shared and read this chapter multiple times, maybe 15 to 20 times already. I've looked at it, explored it. Every time I return to it, I am stirred afresh by my need to lay down my attempts to get to life that are exhausting me, and to take on again with wholehearted trust the way of Jesus and say, okay, you are the good shepherd. You actually have something to say about my work. You actually have something to say about how I parent. You actually have something to say about the choices that I make with my appetites. You actually have something to say about the thing that I do with my neighbors. You actually have something to say about my attitudes. And when I begin to let him in, what does it do? It's like the doorway that leads to life. I lay down my attempts to get over the wall, even my attempts to get to him. And I go with faith through the door. And it says actually in the text that Jesus leads us in and out to find good pasture, that through him we find life. So the question I want to leave us with is quite simple. Am I valuing above all else the shepherd's voice in my life? Am I valuing above all else the shepherd's voice in my life? And we can answer that question in simple, concrete actions by what we do each day. Like, I sometimes think that I'm valuing the voice of the shepherd, but actually I haven't made any space for it. I haven't spent any time trying to read the scriptures or his words. My life is so full of noise. I'm on social media, which isn't bad, but like, it's full of noise. I have no silence, I have no solitude, I have no way to create room for him to speak. And so even though I value his voice more than anything in my life, in concrete action, I'm not, because I'm swept up by the many other voices that are leading my life. So what does that look like in concrete actions for you? Like, what does it actually mean in your day-to-day? Like, in your morning when you wake up, in your lunchtime break at work, like how you finish your day before you go to bed. Maybe when you're faced with a stressful situation, what you do with that. Do you give room to stillness and solitude? Do you let the scriptures challenge our self-focused ideas? Do you let your emotions be voiced with Jesus so they don't cloud your perspective and you're able to get them healed by him? Do we bring pain to him so that it doesn't become the loudest filter in our lives? Do we bring our appetites and our desires in submission to him? Do we think upon the promises that he's given us? Do we bring our work situations, our family scenarios and financial issues and the things that are causing us stress and pressure and ask him to speak into those and to lead us? I think these are challenging questions, and I often return to that dream on the wall when I'm asking that. What is it that Jesus offers? It's life. And I know that that's complex, trying to live that in this moment. But he actually does offer salvation and healing and freedom. He actually does offer that. And it doesn't mean that it's easy or that everything's kind of neatly tied up in a bow or that you've got some kind of utopian dream this side of heaven. It just means that you have life in the middle of it because his presence is with you and because he is the one that's leading you. And Psalm 23 is the one that I want to end with. You know, many of you know it. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything that I need. He leads me beside the still waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me in paths of his right ways. Even though I walk through the valley or the dark valley, I will fear no evil because he is with me. His rod and his staff, they comfort me. You know, even when it's going crazy, this isn't in the text, this is my addition. You know, in the presence of my enemies, he creates a table. He anoints me with oil. My cup overflows. Even goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This picture that it doesn't matter the terrain that you're in, if the shepherd is leading you, you will have life. That's his invitation, I think, and it's simple, but it cuts through all of what we're experiencing, and I just love to give some space for him to minister to that for us, if that's okay.
Thank you for joining us at Foyle Vineyard Church. We love walking out this adventure of being a family together on mission. If you've joined us for the first time today, we'd love to connect with you further. Head over to our website, www.foylevineyard.co.uk, and click I'm New to keep up to date with all the ways in which you can get involved with this busy family. Have a wonderful week, and God bless.